Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Today's topic is a conversation around PTSD. What is PTSD? Post-traumatic stress disorder. What is post-traumatic stress disorder? It's when you've been exposed to a traumatic event which is not part of everyday life, so it is not considered normal. An example of what's considered normal is somebody behaving in an abnormal way in your company, somebody stealing, somebody breaking, witnessing a murder, witnessing a death, witnessing a shooting, witnessing somebody that you know or care about behaving in an odd, strange way, whether it's having a stroke or having a fit, an epileptic fit, or whether they're having a psychotic episode. It's just something that happens that's not part of your everyday normal. Now, what I want to do is I want to look at how PTSD impacts self-sabotaging behaviors. Why is that the case? So what I want to do is connect PTSD to loss and connect that loss to self-sabotage. So what do we see here? When someone is exposed to a traumatic event, and more specifically an event that they witnessed a loss, so a passing of a loved one, and that passing could have been a very slow passing, or it could have been a very rapid, shocking, unexpected passing, they have what remains is what we call survivor's guilt. Survivor's guilt is the person feels guilty that they survived while the other one didn't. Now, PTSD is a term that was coined during war times. When soldiers went off to war, of course, there were those that returned and those that didn't. Those that returned, people would say, were never the same again. Why were they never the same again? Well, if you look at what happened historically, they developed survivor's guilt, an excessive amount of guilt for living when the people they were with didn't live, an excessive amount of shame for being alive when the people that they went to war with didn't. The same thing happens with passing of a loved one. An excessive amount of guilt becomes a factor because you feel like you get to live while this person gets robbed of life. And what happens in that trauma is you morph that to feel like guilty that you have a future when the person that passed hasn't had a future. So if you look at what starts happening psychologically then you start sabotaging your future. You start making your future difficult for yourself. How do you start doing that? You start doing that through starting engaging in risky behaviors. What did soldiers do when they came back from war? They started drinking a lot more. Risky behaviors. They started looking at dopamine hits. What am I going to do? Drink more. Or what am I going to do? Drug more. What am I going to do? Start shouting and screaming more in the house. Start physically abusing at home. Start verbally abusing at home. Taking guns and just shooting off guns. So what are they doing? They start engaging in extreme behaviors and quite violent and threatening and harassing behaviors. So in essence, they were self-sabotaging their relationships, but also self-sabotaging their futures. So if you are somebody that has lost a loved one, whether it's recently or in the past, and you can vouch that this has been very traumatic for you, I want you to look at, have you actually been engaging in self-sabotaging behaviors? Dopamine hits. Self-sabotaging behaviors can be things like, have you engaged in excessive drinking, excessive drugging? Have you developed any other forms of addiction, over-the-counter medication, screen addiction, infidelity addiction, pornography addiction, any addictions of any sorts, shopping addictions, anything like that? If that's the case, it may be because you're at the mercy of your post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms, and it may be wise to seek treatment to help you work through the trauma of that so that you can actually start looking at self-sabotaging less, and that way you can actually start behaving in a more sustainable way and a more regulated way for your future.